Hi, I am Dr. Rasheem, an independent scholar and social science researcher whose scholarship encourages a critical examination of society and culture through race, class, gender, sexual orientation, pretty much anything based around concepts of identity. As an instructor, I'm very much committed to helping students gain a deeper insight into an interdisciplinary, cross-cultural, intersectional approach to the academic study of marginalized populations. And today, I'd like to talk to you about unpacking privilege and unlocking power. Why is this conversation important? I believe too often we have conversations around privilege or about privilege without having a mutual understanding of exactly what it is and how it operates in our environment. Because of this lack of knowledge, we often unknowingly perpetuate harm. One of the things that makes talking about privilege so challenging is there's a few things actually. One, privilege is very much normalized. Addressing your own privilege will be a constant process. It will require a great deal of reflection and adaptation over time. It's also more than likely it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. All the more reason why it's very important to even have this conversation in the first place, because it's so normal, because it's a challenging conversation to have, because when we're talking about it, we're not always on the same page about what it is or how it operates in our everyday life. Privilege operates on personal, interpersonal, cultural, institutional levels, and it gives advantages or favors or benefits to members of a dominant group at the expense of members of another group. Now, in the United States, privilege is granted to people on their membership in some of the following ways. And I feel like it's really important to highlight these ways because I think the only privilege that typically comes to our mind a lot of times when we talk about privilege is white privilege. But there's quite a few other privileges, and it's very important to be able to identify those, because if you're only able to identify white privilege, then you miss the point of exactly what privilege is when it's only attached to a concept of race and not a concept of power and opportunities or advantage or favors or benefits granted to one group at the disadvantage of another group. So in US culture, there are advantages based on race. There are advantages that some folks have based on their ability, their orientation, their gender, their religion, their class, their age, and their language. Because privilege is so normalized and part of status quo, it can be challenging to recognize it. And recognizing your own privilege, again, that will be a constant process. Because one of the aspects of it is because privilege is so uncomfortable to even have a conversation about. And if you are under the belief that you have absolutely no privilege, I would invite you to do a little exercise with me. I would invite you to take out a sheet of paper, and on the sheet of paper, draw 2 lines in the middle, so you'll have 3 columns. And at the top of one of those lines, write race. At the top of another line, write abilities. At the top of another one, write gender. I'm going to invite you to actually go ahead and draw a line horizontally through the middle. So at this point, you have a sheet of paper. It has 2 lines. So right there, you have 2 columns. And then you're going to draw a line straight across the middle. So you're basically drawing an H, but it's going through all the way. So you have essentially 6 columns, 3 at the top, 3 at the bottom. The first 3 at the top will say race, ability, gender. Then you'll have another one that says citizenship, cisgender, and religion, right? So let's start, if we will, with the most obvious one, the race. So if you can answer yes to any of these, put a check in the race category. I can, if I wish to be in the company of people of only of my race most of the time, I can do that easily. So if you could be in the company of people of your own race most of the time, fairly easily put a check in that box. If I wanted to, I could avoid spending time with people who did not look like me or held my same beliefs. Easily put a check in that box. Next one, number 3. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I won't be followed or harassed. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color is represented in that national heritage. I can be sure that my children will be given a curriculum or materials that testify to the existence and excellence of their race. I can be pretty sure that having my voice heard in a group in which I'm the only member of my race, I will have my voice heard. I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own physical protection. Next, I'd like you to go to the ability column and check all the ones that apply to you. I can easily arrange to be in the company of people of my physical ability. If I need to move, I can easily be assured of purchasing housing or getting access to buildings easily. I can be assured that my entire neighborhood will be accessible to me. I can reasonably assume that I could go shopping alone, and they'll always have appropriate accommodations. I could turn on the television or open a newspaper and see people of my physical ability represented. In school, I was given curriculum material which showed people who look like me as a role model. I can be assured that assumptions about my mental abilities will not be made based on my physical status. Almost always, when speaking to the person in charge, I'll find someone of the same physical status as me. I have been asked to speak for all physically challenged people. So now we're going to move on to the gender box. So for each one of these that you answer yes to, put a check in that box. My odds of being hired for a job when competing against a female applicant are probably skewed in my favor. If I fail in my job or in my career, I can feel sure that this will not be seen as a dark mark against my entire sex's capability. The next one, the odds of my encountering sexual harassment on the job are low. My odds of being raped are lower than my counterparts. And last one for that box, if I have children, I would not be expected to be the primary nurturer for them. All right, and now I'm going to go over to the citizenship. I am not worried on a daily basis about being discovered or deported along or away with any of my family. I don't have to worry that a small misstep could lead to my deportation, even if I currently have legal authority to be in the U.S. I can apply for a passport, and that'll allow me to travel back and forth to most countries in the world. If I want to get a driver's license, it's a simple matter of bringing along my birth certificate, social security card, insurance, and taking a test. I never have to worry about whether or not I have the proper documentation to get a driver's license. If I apply for a job and they ask for a social security number, I don't have to worry about what to write. If a police officer pulls me over, I could be sure that I haven't been singled out because of my perceived immigration status. And I can vote in any local or national election on policies for people who make laws affecting my life and my community. Cisgender privilege. So check yes in the box in that section if you can say yes to this. I can use public restrooms without fear of being verbally abused, physically intimidated, or arrested. Next, strangers don't assume they can ask me what my genitals look like. Your validity as either a man or a woman or a human is not based on how much surgery you have had or whether or not you pass in that particular gender. Strangers call you by the name that you provide, and they don't ask you questions like, what's your real name or birth name? Or if they know it, don't assume that they have the right to call you by it. If you end up in the emergency room, you don't have to worry that your gender will keep you from receiving appropriate treatment, or that all of your medical issues will be seen as a result of your gender. Add a check to the box if your identity is not considered a mental pathology or has never been considered a mental pathology. Check if you are not required to undergo an extensive psychological evaluation in order to receive basic medical care. Check in that box if you can easily find role models and mentors who share your identity, your same gendered identity. Or put a check if you can answer yes to that your gender is an option on most forms, on all forms. Check if you don't have to deal with old photographs that didn't really reflect who you really are. Now let's go to the religion column. Check yes for all that apply to you. You can expect to have time off from work to celebrate religious holidays. Music and television programs pertaining to your religious holidays are readily accessible. It is easy to find stores that carry items that enable you to practice your faith and celebrate your religious holidays. Holidays supporting your faith are so widely supported, you can often forget that they are limited to your faith. You could worship freely without fear of violence or threats. You can practice your religious customs without being questioned, mocked, or inhibited. If you're being tried in court, you can assume that the jury of your peers will share your faith and not hold that against you in weighing decisions. When swearing an oath, you will place your hands on a religious scripture pertaining to your faith. You can reasonably assume that anyone you encounter will have a decent understanding of your religious beliefs. Politicians responsible for your governance are probably members of your faith. And lastly, your faith can be an aspect of your identity without being a defining aspect. People won't think of you as their Christian friend. I would invite you to just take a look across those boxes and answer questions for yourself. Which of those privileges challenges me? Which of the privileges listed resonates with me? And how can I use my privilege in a category where I have a lot of check marks to help someone else who might have less check marks? Some of the things that came up in some of those may not typically come to mind. And again, this is one of the ways in which privilege is characteristically invisible to people who have it. People in dominant groups often believe that they have earned privileges that they have enjoyed, or that no one or that everyone could have access to the same privileges that they have. The playing field is completely leveled. In fact, privileges are unearned. They are granted to people in the dominant groups, whether they want those privileges or not, and regardless of their stated intent. Unlike targets of oppression, people in dominant groups are frequently unaware that they are a member of a dominant group that receives privileges. It's one of the reasons that it's very important to get a grasp on a very basic level of understanding your own privilege so that you can then leverage that privilege to unlock power, potentially for someone else.